Good evening. Good evening. It's another beautiful week, and we are back to inform you and just educate you. This month, it's done already. Just like that, the month just said,
Oh, yes.
wrapped up with a lot of, I know there's a lot of
Yes.
tired people out there because it was Carnival weekend. And I know there were some people that were partying like for 4 days straight and all of that. We kind of chilled out. I didn't do that. I haven't been in that scene in a little bit, but big ups to those that still have the energy to do it, right? So welcome everyone. My name is Donna Morton Morgan. I am the president of Caribbean American Diaspora, president of Women of Culture, Inc., real estate broker and mindset coach at Inner Vibes Consultant. Hey, Mr. Lewis, how are you?
I am great, Donna. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes. Want to welcome everybody to crrfm.com. My name is Louis Witter. I'm your program director for the Caribbean Rhythms Radio Network. And welcome to Caribbean Diaspora Vibes Tuesday evening. And we just want to welcome you. It's a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, Donna. As you said, the last couple of days for me. What a month it has been, eh?
Yes, it has. Louis,
Yeah.
I think your volume is a little low.
It's low. Can you hear me better?
That's much better, much better.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here this evening, and we just want to welcome everyone to our discussion this evening. Big ups.
Big ups, big ups.
Yeah.
We have the pleasure tonight to we don't often get the VI representation, right? And we definitely don't often get St. Vincent and Barbados. So we have a mix up tonight.
Nice.
We love it. So I'm going to introduce. So tonight's topic is mental health matters. Caribbean people.
Welcome on the topic. Good topic this evening.
Caribbean American people, listen up. American people, church people. Mental health matters. A lot of people are hiding and putting on a good face for work, for church, for, family, but secretly the stress, the depression, feeling defeated, all of that. Gas is high, food is high, mortgage is high, rent is high. So mental health illness is also high. So we have two amazing experts tonight. First, Dr. Letitia Browne-James, we call Dr. LBJ. And
welcome, Doctor.
Awesome. She is the founder and president of LBJ Behavioral Services and Victorious Living Counseling and Consultant. And she's going to tell us a little bit about that. The second business is a nonprofit. So we're going to get to hear about that. And she is VI in the house. Look, VI is another set of party people. Like you have Trini, Guiney, and VI people.
Yeah, VI people. You remember Paul? He's always out there.
Yeah, their energy, they get like an extra dose of energy, So
Christ and Thomas and
they do not play. So, and then we're going to hear from Jean Ann Moses, licensed mental health counselor, also with LBJ Behavioral Services. And Jean Ann is a mix-up, right? So she has, I think mom is from St. Vincent and Grenadines. Dad is from Barbados. So another mix-up right there. So tonight is going to be spicy.
All right.
Yeah. So, so let's kick it off with Dr. LBJ or Dr. Letitia. Mental health. Caribbean folks, Caribbean American, Black Americans, any, you know, Black people on a whole, church people on a whole, sometimes we don't want to hear anything about mental health.
Yes.
Give us it's still a stigma to this day to say, I need counseling, I need therapy. You know, especially in the Caribbean household, they're gonna label you as mad man, mad woman, you know, all these things. It's unfortunate that still in 2024, we are still dealing with the stigma of mental health. So let's start there. How do you even approach, or what do you think we can do to reduce that stigma?
Yes, well, it's definitely still a stigma. Thank you for having us on. I think we just have to talk about it, you know, forums like this to talk about the stigma and dismantling the stigma. You know, I always say we have to take care of our body, mind, and spirit. It all has to be connected. If there's a disconnect in there, then the system is off. It's no longer equal, it's no longer balanced, right? And just like many things that we grew up learning in the Caribbean, that sometimes as you get older, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't really make any sense. You know, for example, you know, I know my grandmother used to say things like, you can't eat banana at night because it's going to hurt your belly. And my mother used to say, how does your stomach know it's night? You know, it doesn't make any sense, you know? So it's one of those things where it's been passed down from generation to generation. You know, it's a sign of weakness. You know, if you believe in God, or, you know, you have faith, you know, Rastafarianism, whatever it is you believe in, right? You should go to your higher power. And if you're still struggling, or you feel like your higher power isn't enough, then something must be wrong with you. Something must be broken within you. You know, that's the messaging. And so how I approach it with people is, I mean, it helps that I'm of Caribbean descent. You know, I'm from the VI, I'm from St. Thomas, born and raised. And I talk to people about me being a counselor, which also helps to bring it down a little bit. Okay, wait, if she's from the Caribbean, she's from the VI, she's in mental health, maybe she knows what she's talking about, right? And so one of the things that I tell them is, you can have God and a counselor, you know, if God is a part of the equation. Or if you have a physical problem, what do? You know, you may drink your bush, right? But after a while, if it's cancer, if it's pneumonia, something that it's just not, you're not getting it out with the natural remedies or with prayer or meditation, whatever it is that you're doing, more than likely you're going to go to a doctor, right, to address the physical concern. And there's less stigma associated with going to the doctor for a physical concern than there is for a mental health or an emotional concern. So I just try to equate it to, it's a part of our health, you know, holistic health. We have to take care of every part of ourselves, our emotional selves, our mental selves, our physical selves. And it is no different than going to see a specialist for physical concerns, because a mental health professional is someone that just has an expertise in helping you address those issues, whether it be grief and loss, you know, we'll hear things like, if someone dies, well, they're in a better place. Okay, maybe, right? You know, we're not going to debate that. At the same time, the loss of the physical presence is still very strong, you know, and sometimes you might need to go to see someone. You know, Jean Ann actually specializes in grief and loss, to help you, we call it meaning making in counseling, to make sense of the loss. How do you cope with it in a healthy manner? You know, and you could be dealing with something, but if it's affecting you to the point that you're having a hard time, let's say getting out of bed, you're having a hard time functioning at work, right? Then you probably need a little something else. There's also a big stigma associated, well, I don't want to take medicine. You don't always have to take medicine, you know, if there's a mental health or an emotional concerns. Sometimes you do, because there might be a chemical imbalance, but sometimes just traditional talk therapy or some type of mental health intervention can help address the issue, alleviate the issue, help the individual learn ways to cope, you know, and different things that may work for them, because self-care is very important, and self-care can look very different for all of us, right? So having an objective party to talk through some of those things. Okay, what can you do? What is within your purview? What is practical for you to do? to help you cope with whatever it is that you're going through. You know, similarly, when you go to the doctor, there may be different remedies that the doctor may recommend, but you know, a good doctor will help you figure out what remedy is right for you. What dosage, if medication is involved, what dosage is right for you. So it's a similar thing with your mental health. What intervention, what strategy, you know, what approach might be right for you to help you alleviate or learn to live with or cope with whatever the issue is that one may be dealing with.
Wow. Lots of stuff you have said there, Dr. James. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm well. How are you, sir?
Very well. You know, I'm listening to you, and you said a lot there, which is quite correct. How do you find the acceptance of this whole mental health within the Caribbean community? Do you find people coming to you and say, hey, I have a problem, or is it something that you guys are seeking out or just coming up on? How has been your diagnosis with individuals?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit of both. For the most part, people come to us, you know, but I mean, we do advertise, we do have discussions like this, which oftentimes will lead to people say, you know what, something you said really struck a chord with me, or it helped me to understand it differently, because I grew up hearing, a lot of times it's the grandmothers, right? I grew up hearing my grandmother or my mother or my father, my auntie, whomever it is. Because, you know, in the Caribbean islands, we practice the village mentality. So within the village, right, you know, there was some type of messaging, right? Unfortunately, some type of misinformation. And we're not knocking our ancestors, because they did the best that they could with what they knew, right? And a lot of this stigma goes all the way back to slavery and what was available to us, what we had access to at the time. A lot of time, you know, back then, they didn't have a lot of access. You know, there was only the church, right? Or only going to the beach or going to the garden or whatever it is as a way to cope, going out into nature. And those were what they had access to. So those were the things that were passed down at, you know, prayer and different things like that. Hymns, if you think about hymns, you know, the hymns were what got the slaves through a lot of the struggles that they had. So you sing, you go to church, you pray, you do all of these things, you eat right, you exercise, and you should be okay. Again, those things are wonderful and we should do those things, but sometimes we need a little bit additional support, you know, in addition to that. So we have to understand even the historical context of where these messages came from and how they went down, you know, throughout the years, throughout the generations. And, you know, to a certain extent, the messaging may have gotten distorted a little bit. Some misinformation may have occurred that continues to perpetuate the stigma. So it is our job as people of color, as people of Caribbean descent, as licensed and board certified counselors, you know, who are experts in the area, to help to dismantle those things. But we don't want to dismiss them also, right? We want to, okay, where does that messaging come from? Where did you hear about mental health, or what does it mean to you? What were the talks in your circles, you know, about mental health, and then hear what they say, and then acknowledge that and say something like, well, listen, I grew up hearing the same thing, you know, but it wasn't until you stepped out, you went off to college, you moved out of the Caribbean, wherever you moved to, you know, you got other experiences, you read books and you got exposed to things, you know, now we have social media, we have podcasts, we have all of these other things, YouTube, that can also help us to learn new things or to think very differently. But we'd spend a lot of time acknowledging and normalizing the messaging while also educating and dismantling the misinformation to help people be open to the idea. It's not our job or our role. It's not even ethical for us to impose our values on people, but just to hear where they're coming from, meet them where they are. Okay, you know, and I call it seed planting, you know, and plant some seeds and then let them make out for themselves, okay, you know what, this applies to my life, or I can see myself doing this, or maybe I'll try. And sometimes people do reach out to the practice because they like I used to have a Haitian counselor on staff, and you know, people would Google Haitian speaking counselor. I have two counselors of Jamaican descent on staff. So they will Google that and then it'll bring up the practice. So then they'll reach out. You know, there's a sense of community, there's a sense of familiarity with someone who come from a similar or the same background as you. Like, okay, I don't have to spend a lot of time explaining, you know, the cultural nuances because this person get it. They grew up on the island or they grew up in the island, so they understand some of the subtle nuances that someone that's not of Caribbean descent may not understand. So all of those things contribute to helping to make people be more open to the idea and to help break down those barriers and reduce the stigma associated with it.
Interesting. And what percentage of young people do you see coming or you're identifying as with mental health issues?
Young people. Oh, when you say young, like from what age group? Quite a
Well, I mean, people under, you know, 20, 25, what are you seeing a uptick in that in terms of mental issues with our young people?
Yeah, but you know, I don't know if it's an uptake necessarily in mental issues, and I would love to hear Jeananne's perspective, but I think there's actually more of an openness and an awareness. I mean, yeah, awareness of the importance of mental health and openness to the idea of reaching out for assistance from a mental health professional when they're struggling, when they're dealing with things than we tend to see with our older people.
And I think that's a good point, because younger people they're more apt to reaching out to, you know, whereas our generation and older, because of the stigma from the Caribbean community that, you know, oh my God, Lord have mercy, you know.
We're not nothing done now. We rather go to our grave with this mental problem.
Right.
Yeah, older folks. And that's why I was curious
even
about
COVID.
Mm-hmm.
COVID had there was so much loss.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Yes.
people, I mean, so all of that, people are still experiencing that grief. And I know that that's Jean Ann's specialty. So I think sometimes we downplay that part, right? We downplay the loss. It could be divorce, it could be any type of anything trauma. So let's bring in Miss Jean Ann. And how do you see, you know, people dealing with the grief?
I think none of us have dealt with it, right? And I don't think, if we're looking at the young people, we haven't dealt with it as the elders. So if we haven't dealt with it, what are we saying to our children? And that's how it's showing up.
Right.
You know, Donna, you have adolescent grandchildren, and I don't have that yet, but we have those children in that age group, and you see it. When we went through COVID, I liken what we went through with COVID as war in America, right? We've never had war in our land unless you've come from a war-torn country. But for us, watching people being toted away in a U-Haul van, or somebody who's worked in the medical field, whatever, we've acted like it's okay and we're back to life as normal.
Right.
The children were out of school for months. The teachers are coming back in. They're living their trauma, and the children are not able to function because we're not able to function. We're not helping them, right? We expect them to act as normal. If you as an adult, fully grown, some of us, you know, we're at a certain stage in life, can't function, how do we expect them to? So we are seeing an uptake in dying by suicide because they really don't understand that you can't come back, some of them, right? And the other side is they saw death happen like a throwaway and no one is listening. We're telling them to hear us, but we're not listening to them. What I see a lot with the young people is that they're asking their parents to come for therapy and the parents are listening. That is the gift that COVID gave, I think, to this field. Do more mature people have a problem accepting, even in our culture? I think it's a secret, but they're coming in droves. Because I have a lot of, I call them WIs, West Indian people showing up at the door. They're knocking, they're asking for help. They're asking for medication, because let's talk the truth about mental health. It's not just about talk therapy. They also need medication, and it goes hand in hand, right? We all have that aunt that lived in the closet and nobody talks about. When we have you go to the doctor, was anybody sick in your family? You said no, but I did have a auntie that lived in the closet. You know why she was in the closet? But she was schizophrenic. She had a mental breakdown and no one talked about it. So do you have schizophrenia in your family? Well, I don't know. Well, I had an aunt, a cousin, used to run around and scream and carry on. Oh, so you mean you had autism in your family? But we don't talk about it because it's not shame. It's the fact that for mothers, I would say for mothers, because I'm a mother, and even the father, most as the women, we are the stigma, we feel like it's stigmatized, right? And so then we don't make our children feel it's okay to talk about it, right? But the minute we make it okay Just like if you have a headache, you take Tylenol, right? Say, well, I don't take medication. Okay, so let me make it simple. You're gonna have your teeth pulled. You're pulling it without medicine? No, it's the same thing. When you're going in to get the help and you need it to be well-rounded, you need to have all facets met. And sometimes it may mean you go to the doctor and something is wrong with you, that it's not just mental, but maybe it's physical, tied hand in hand. And let's help you overcome that. Because when we're able to heal body, mind, and spirit, the person is made whole. It's not going to happen overnight, because guess what? You're going to come into a session. I tell people, I'm not a therapist, Donna, you know me, I'm not for everybody, right? Because I'm a straight shooter. But I'm a straight shooter because we've been living a lie. And sometimes, because everybody doesn't get a prize. But when we tell the truth, when they're living in grief because somebody was sexually molested, but no one talked about it, but everybody knew the secret.
Right.
You walk into a place and you allow them to grieve that they weren't allowed to be a child for a hot minute. They're able to accept it and they're able to grow. It's not going to happen overnight, because you're the age you are and you didn't get here by accident. So you have to give it some time for it to work. So you're going to walk into the therapist and I didn't like her. Well, you went to the barber, you keep going to the same barber, you're cutting your hair crooked, but you keep going. Give the therapist a chance. See if it works. And if not, find someone who works for you, but don't not go in. That's where kids are different. They're going to ask for what they need. Listen to them. Listen when they ask you for help. I don't feel good. Oh, you're trying not to go to school because you're trying to be sick because you're failing a test? No, maybe they have a learning disability that you missed. So instead, the teacher's telling your child is misbehaving, but instead of you listening to your child, you get your child tested, you find it's not something that the child did, it's something they need assistance with. You take them to therapists, the therapist helps them, and there's healing in the home, and the child is made whole from young. How many of us would, they call you dotish, right?
Yep.
It's the same. That's what I say for kids. Listen, mothers and fathers, listen to your children. They're telling you the truth, even if you don't like it. They say they don't want to go sit by Uncle John. Don't let them.
Right.
Because that's where the sexual trauma started, that your child is acting out like a maniac in your house. Sorry, I'm not politically correct, but you understand?
No,
You're
I love it.
absolutely right. You are absolutely right, ma'am.
Yeah. And similarly to that word maniac, crazy, we use that word a lot. Or if you hear people talking about, have you thought about seeing a counselor? The first thing they say 9 out of 10 times is, I'm not crazy. So first we have to stop associating seeking out mental help with craziness. What is craziness? Like Jean Ann was saying, the uncle that may have schizophrenia, those were the people that we refer to in our community as crazy or as lunatics, not understanding that there is a legitimate untreated mental health condition there, right? So we talk about dismantling certain words and not associating certain words with needing assistance when it comes to our mental health.
Mm. Very well.
So you all are seeing more young people, which is good. So we're seeing that because they're more open. They are more open to expressing feelings. There's a higher rate of divorce. We're missing a key piece where there's such a high rate of divorce with children, and then parents just move on, right? But then those young people, especially the teens or tweens, there's no counseling for that little group. There's a mandatory something, 4 hours, something like that, the parents have to take. But so we are really missing the mark on a lot of these little things, where now that child is still going through and dealing with that separation, that loss of a parent in the home, or the fighting. And then we just continue on like, oh, go to school. And then there's so much pressure with the school and this and the after school sports. These kids are so, when we used to come home from school, we just go play. We just go play ball, netball, whatever outside, climb trees, right? Find mangoes. That was like our
Just drop the bag. You come home, you drop the bag, and you're gone.
Yeah. So that means you had like, ooh, you had a long day. So
Yeah.
now we get to play. Kids
Yeah.
these days, I mean, you have to, it's an appointment schedule. There you got this and that. You got baseball practice, you got football, and you got, and we are not like, when, you know, when do they get a break? At what time of the night when they have to come home and then do homework and then do it all over again? So, and then when they break, we're like, well, we don't understand,
Right.
you know?
Right. That is really crucial with the expectations of our children, you know, and just exactly what you said. You come home, you get something to eat, you jump into the homework or studying, and there's no downtime. There's no time for a break. So all of those things contribute to our mental wellness and our mental health by giving the kids a break, right? You know, and figuring out what they need after being in school all day, you know, studying and working so hard, there's no break. And especially within like the public school system here on the mainland, or even within the Caribbean, you know, there's a lot of push for the academic rigor, which is a good thing, but we have to find balance within that and understand how, if there's no balance and if there's no time for decompressing or taking a breath and allowing children to play, especially little children. It's natural for children to play, you know, it contributes to a lot of the things that we see, you know, the rebellion and different things like that, because there's no time or there's no balance to help them manage the academics and all of the things that they have to do with just being able to be a kid in that setting.
And for question for you both, do you see the government healthcare system in your country, are they taking more interest in this particular part of our health in the island?
Well, I can speak for the Virgin Islands. I think there is definitely some improvements there. You know, for example, there's a lot more counselors available on the islands, as well as now the Virgin Islands has, within the last 2 years or so, has recently adopted licensure for counselors there. So there's certainly some more openness to it, but certainly there still is stigma associated with it. And then, of course, in some of the other islands, not the Virgin Islands, the U.S. Virgin Islands, there's still a lot of stigma associated with mental health, that it may not be as progressive, I guess, you know, but of course I can't speak for all of them, but that's just what I've observed in my encounters in the Caribbean.
What are you all seeing like that's triggering mental? Is it just stress, or is there anything extra or is it just a normal stressful lifestyle, stress of bills, relationships?
I think each person's trauma is their own trauma. And so to try and give a handle to it is not fair. I use a liken to someone falling down. You know, you may trip and fall and you laugh and you think that's funny. I may trip and fall and all of a sudden I go into a full-blown panic attack and I need help because you don't know what's attached to my trauma, right? And so it really is, and your trauma is your trauma. And we try and label and pigeonhole things, and somebody will say, well, this happened this one, it's not that important. I can't tell you, because your body knows what sets it off, right? Your body knows what it's triggered. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. We talk about that a lot. It's cellular DNA. It's a part of you. Some of it, I may be going too deep in the sense of it's in utero. You're born that way. You know, you'll say, no, she had just like your mother. When the mother was carrying her, she was like this and this. And the child acts as say, what's that? That's the body remembers the trauma that happened in utero. And so we don't know after the child is born and they act out, you know, that's their trauma. That's what happened. That's how they react to it. And that's how they manage. And so you come to therapy and we figure it out. I'm the therapist. I go to the grief level because we're grieving a part of ourselves. We don't always know what it is, right? But there's a forgotten piece that we grieve. And in our society, we're not allowed to grieve. Back in the day, somebody dies, you have 9 nights and you do the 40 nights, and at least you get some time to wrap your head around it. We don't do that. They're dead, 3 days, we're back to work, and this life has moved on. And people are like, you know, you're okay, get over it. No one gets to tell you your timeline of your grief. And because of that grief, and people cut you off, you now have trauma. And it goes from this complicated grief because you've lost your mother that you've had your whole life, and someone expects you to be fine after 3 days. How can you live? And how do you not react to other people in the world? And how do you show up in the world to even show up for yourself? And that's what happened to
Very
children.
good point. Very good point. I wanted to also ask, you know, in the Caribbean, we have a lot of hurricane. Do you think some of them hurricane cause trauma? Don't we think some of these
Absolutely
cause a lot of trauma to our young people? And maybe immediately after these hurricane, we should try and get some of these young people into some counseling and say, hey, okay, things are going to be all right. You know, we have so many of these destruction come to the Caribbean island, and some of those things might be factors that pertaining to these problems.
Yes, 110%, you know, and we're not understanding how the trauma of these things can, like you said, impact a person in that way, or a child in that way, not understanding what has occurred. And even I was one of those children, you know, that grew up in St. Thomas, where there were hurricanes. And one of them in particular, I remember I saw our roof, you know, being blown up like paper, like paper, you know, and I never received any services for it. Back in, what was it, 2017, when Hurricane, what was it, Maria and Irma devastated the Caribbean, you know, St. Thomas and St. Croix, you know, one of those islands that were completely devastated. I remember reaching out, like trying to find, you know, and I did go down, you know, but trying to find some spaces where I could provide like some crisis counseling. And of course, you know, not knocking them, because there was so much happening and it was so devastating and traumatizing that, you know, and then when you think about trauma and a major event like that, you have to look at the almost like prioritizing the needs, you know, food, shelter, medicine, clothing, and then moving on to the other things like addressing mental health, spirituality, and things like that. But it was so chaotic, there really wasn't a lot of room or help to obtain, or to find a space to be able to provide, like, you know, the crisis counseling in the aftermath. And just like Jean-Ann was saying, you know, the grief and the trauma, there's loss associated with that. If you lost your home, I just had a friend, you know, a classmate from back home actually, that completely lost her home, her and her children in a fire. And I remember reading some of the comments, and people were saying things like, well, you know, be happy that you have life. And I remember feeling very frustrated, like, oh, well, of course she's happy that they have life, but they just lost their home. You know what I mean? They lost their prized possessions and things that had sentimental value and things like that. That is traumatic, you know, so you can't just you're grateful for having life, or you're upset that you lost these things. The two things can coexist. You can still be grateful for life and thankful to God that you're alive and your family made it out of something so traumatic, you know, whether it's a hurricane or whatever, but there's still a grief and loss associated with losing your things and your home as you knew it, and now you're displaced, and those things can coexist. So I think we have to really do a better job of understanding that and not having people choose either or, because again, they can coexist.
Yes.
Very good.
Do we have any questions? I know we've added some more professionals that's on Zoom. Dr. Bavon Debrio, Beverly Debrio, Dr. Arlene Adams. Anyone have a comment or a question so far? You're muted, Dr. Arlene.
I just want to applaud our sisters professional on these topics. It is so needed. I agree with Jean-Ann Moses about the gift that COVID has brought us. Mental health has been around for centuries. However, with the impact of COVID, it escalated this problem. And I liked also the thought about, you know, our roots in the Caribbean. After a death, you know, there's 9 nights and someone says 40 days. I don't remember. I did not really think about it much until she said it. And I said, Do we as people of culture really knows what the meaning of those days and how it has helped our people over the years and coming to this new culture? And like she said, just 3 days and everything must be back to normal. And absolutely not. You can't put a time limit on grief. And so I have to say, post-COVID, even within our churches now, well, one of the presentations that will be coming up in our churches every year, they have this big seminar all over internationally for people who, abuse and traumas. And this year is a trauma-informed church. And
Good.
it is wide because there's so much trauma and the complicated grief. So for years, I'm a part of the grief loss team, and it's more meaningful to me now more than ever since COVID. And I just embrace you, sister, and salute you, sisters, for the awesome work that you're doing, because the Lord wants us to be in, above all, he said, I wish that you prosper and be in good health, not just physically, but well-rounded. So when one aspect, well, maybe it's the physical, psychological, whatever is missing, we're out of balance. So I thank you for the work that you do.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Awesome.
Thank you so much for that. Just
Well,
checking with Dr. Bavon or Beverly. So no comments there.
And thank you, Dr. Brown. She was just giving us a mouthful, and I was just going along with her. Thank you so much. Awesome. I salute my people, Jean Ann Moses and Dr. Browne-James, to see our people making this contribution to our community, which is, I've been in the school districts for years, and don't mention mental health to people from our heritage. They don't want to hear it. They might say it's phobia or something else, but they're not going to the shrink. So I applaud your work. And Louis, thank you for that thought about the impact of storms on our people. Because sometimes, we think about provision of food and shelter, but like you said, where's the lost part? What happened to that? Yeah, so thank you. Great job.
Since you touched on church, we were speaking earlier, is the emphasis happening in the church community about mental health, or is it still not really talked about? Because if you know Jesus, you're supposed to be all right. So so that seems to be a portion too, where people are hiding behind that veil. And it's also not just for mental health, but we're seeing it with health disparities, right? We're seeing it with obesity, with cancers, all the different high blood pressure, all these different illnesses are very, very, very high in our churches. And at some point we do have to ask why. Something is, I know it's a question, it's where nobody really likes to go to, but sometimes as a corporation, you have to evaluate your corporation, evaluate the pluses and the minuses and all of that. And I think at this point, with our physical health and mental health declining in such a way, but we have so many more churches. Like in Jamaica, there's more church per square foot, And so if we're having more churches, but less mental health, less physical health, something is not flowing. The math is not adding up.
Not planning out right. But I can tell you, Donna and guys on the panel, church, that's the last place that will open up about mental health. The very, very last.
Other than Dr. Arlene's trauma.
Right. Okay. These church leaders are not coming out with that. They don't want to look like they're weak in the spirit. The gospel is not right. Oh, I'm sending you to a shrink, and I'm talking about your mental. You know, Jesus Christ can take care of it, which we know that, right? We're not this and that. But there should be some programs or some way to reach out to people like Dr. James and everyone else that is trying to assist in this program. But you will not find, I tell you, the church is tight-lips on this, and they don't help in these areas, unfortunately.
If I can,
Mr. Lewis,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd just like to add, good evening, everyone. I was just wondering, or trying to go different direction from you. Is it that they wouldn't open up because it's a can of worm? Or is it because they have their own belief that they're feeding you? And if you become mentally conscious, you will not be subjected to their belief. So therefore, I'm going to keep you in the closet like that uncle that Dr. James spoke about earlier. We all have that uncle that we denied or overlooked, right? So in the church, I find there's a lot of people in that arena, but that's because if the water that you're drinking is no good, how can it help you? I'm not saying that all of them, but if I give you that consciousness, I'll be able to lead. Okay, the goal of you being there is not to lead, it's to follow.
Yes.
So that's the opposite side of it.
Yeah. It could be a combination of both.
Yes.
yes, that's what I was going to say. It's both. In some instances and some spaces, that definitely is the case. But on the other hand, a lot of it goes back to the misinformation. You know, like I said, you can have Jesus and a therapist, or God and a therapist. And even when you were saying, Mr. Lewis, about a shrink, right? You know, it's a sign of weakness. What is a shrink? I know a shrink to be someone that is a psychiatrist, right? So again, lack of information, ignorance in our community, where we don't even understand the difference between what a psychiatrist is, what a psychologist is, and what a counselor is. We all have a different role within mental health. So a quick breakdown, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor that has training in psychology, and they're able to prescribe medication. So is a nurse practitioner, right? A counselor, Jeanette and I are counselors, a therapist. We don't prescribe medication. We address it through counseling intervention, through the talk therapy and things like that. And a psychologist, for the most part, depending on the type of psychologist, they're more on the testing side. You may have a clinical psychologist that can do some traditional talk counseling, therapy. But it's important for us to dispel the myths and to understand the differences of what everyone's role is. Again, using the medical example, you have a cardiologist, you have an oncologist, you have a pediatrician. There are different specialties. So we have to understand the different specialties and try to figure out, okay, for this particular problem, who do I need to see? Jeanette mentioned earlier that and I did too, you might need medication for certain things because there is a chemical imbalance that medication can help address, but not always, right? So it's important to understand that going to see a counselor for grief and loss, for a trauma that we overlooked or that we didn't even recognize was a trauma, because a lot of times too, even using the hurricane example, people don't understand that those things are traumatic. They think of trauma as like watching someone getting a gunshot wound or something like that, experiencing a home invasion. Yes, those things are traumatic, right? But having a very traumatizing birth, for example, it is traumatic. A parent going off to the military or going off to prison or something like that, that can also be traumatic. Watching the roof blow off like paper, like we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Traumatic. Yeah, so we have to, seek out information and share information to help dispel those myths by helping people to not function out of ignorance, but function out of information and seeking out information so that we are informed and we could ascribe to like a trauma-informed church. My church is also trauma-informed. I'm in Florida, but there are churches that are certainly open. That's one of the things that we do as well. We will churches to talk to churches and communities to help them understand that, again, seeking out mental health services does not mean that you're denying Jesus. Okay, you can have both, and they can, again, that coexisting thing, they can coexist, and it's fine. It doesn't diminish your faith. It's using that wisdom that the Bible talks about to seek out the wise counsel and to use wisdom in all that you do so that you can be healthy and function properly.
Awesome.
Kudos
All
to
right.
those churches.
Can I
Yeah.
just say for a second? I just want to say something with this, because you go to a doctor, and what I find so interesting, because I was raised by one, so many in our community are nurses. So the irony of your question, my mother's a nurse, right? Most of everybody in the Caribbean, you find that mother's a nurse, somebody's always in the medical field. So for us not to want to do that part doesn't make sense. But I know that my mother's a nurse. You could only take Tylenol back in the day, right? Because we didn't know, because a lot of times as Black folk, we would have test subjects. Let's just tell the truth and shame the devil. And so because of that fact, and those old time nurses knew that, that's a lot of times where the fear comes from not trusting.
Yes.
To Dr. James' point, we don't give medication, right? I've had somebody tell me, I went to my therapist and she gave me a card for medical marijuana, but she didn't. Because if she did, I don't know what kind of doctor, because I can't write a card for anybody. I can't write the first medication if I wanted to, right? Because that's why everybody has their place. There's licensures for a reason. And that's the other thing. We all are licensed by the state. We're mandated by the state. So I can't just willy-nilly take care of you without doing what we need to do. But going back to the church, I think most churches are stepping up in a different way. And I know we have a lot of Christian counselors. And I would say this, God help, not God that helps, so he says, everything in heaven and earth is yours, O Lord, and this is your kingdom. So if God made everything, and if you know to go to the doctor when you're sick and you know to go buy food, he helped us to give us the knowledge. He gave us the knowledge to be able to help you talk through a peace. It's not everybody you want to talk to about your business. It's not everybody you want to share it, even if it's a friend, right? You don't want to. You want to be in a place that's safe. I like, me personally, as I've gone to therapy. I believe in therapy before I was a therapist. I was a banker for over 25 years, truth be told, right? But when I went into it, I wanted someone that looked like me, that was my age group, and that was my culture. Because there are things in our culture, like you get licks, right? We call it licks in the Caribbean, right? But you go to somebody, you have to explain, oh, you were abused, but we know this term. There was licks and then there was licks.
Mhm.
And it was understanding your culture that you don't feel shame. And so I ended up finding someone that worked that way for me. And I didn't have to explain away my culture. So I didn't have to delve into it until I was ready. And I have to say one thing, I'm sorry, Dr. Browne-James, LBJ, the other thing is adoption. So a lot of times we leave our kids in the Caribbean and we bring them back here when they're grown, a little older, and we think life is normal, and they're not, because coming back after not living with their parents for a long time, which is another thing that causes problem in the family, it's like an adopted child. By the way, most of us are certified in adoption counseling at competency at Victorious Living and LBJ Behavioral Services, just so you know, because that's a lot that happens in our community.
Yes.
Is that the children were put away, then they're now back home, and we want to act like the family is normal. Well, you missed the formative years of that child. You don't know them. You want to train them, you want to discipline them, but you don't know who that child is. And that's a big thing in our community, and that's a big thing that happens in the church. So then we use the church to control the child, because Satan will do it for you. And the truth is, all they need is your love and acceptance. And that's when you take them into therapy, because they need to be able to transition back into life with you. So I just had to put that plug for a hot minute.
Boy, you know,
Amen.
Gina, that is such a
Wow.
I think majority of us coming from the Caribbean probably need counseling at some point in our life, because whether it's the name calling and that we had to deal with, right, for a lot of us, and then like you said, even though our families were trying to do the best, a lot of children were left home for a period of years at times. We're not talking about like a 6 months so you can get situated. A lot of years with a grandparent or aunt or something like that. And then you trying to reconnect years later, it's not easy. You've got siblings that are not communicating properly. The bond is not there. The resentment's there. People are 60 years old still talking about, well, you left me when I was 5, 6.
Attachment. Yes, that's a whole other segment, you know. Yes, exactly. You know, there was a breach in the attachment. And again, just like Jeanette was saying, you can't expect the kid to automatically respect or show love. And we're not saying to disrespect, but it's not as natural as we were taught or conditioned to believe that it is. When that attachment or that bond has been broken, there needs to be a time of healing and replenishing. Just like if you have a broken bone, you have to put on a cast, right?
Right.
And it doesn't heal automatically. It takes time, and it takes a lot of intentional work to help it to heal and to rebuild from where the break occurred, or, you know, wherever that fracture occurred.
You know, I personally, I was raised by my aunt, but then my mother reconnected in my life years later, actually teenage. And, you know, that was a situation. I mean, one day someone just called and go, I think I was 10 years old. You know, that's not your mother. Who you're living with, that's not your mother. I had no counseling, nothing, just a phone call that said, that's not, by the way, that's not your mother. That's your auntie. This is how a lot of children
Forget the
in
news.
the Caribbean community, and then nobody, they just say, well, what's wrong with you? And then later on, you have to then bond with that family member, the mom or dad, the siblings. So I didn't grow up with any of my siblings. So, you know, and then as adults, you were like, well, how do you even deal with it? And a lot of times when you see a lot of family members not speaking to each other, it's from all of this from we were children that nobody talked about. We kept it a hush hush. We are big people now. You're a big man and a big woman. What are you bringing that up for? And it's still there, and it festers, and then people just cut each other off, stop talking to each other.
Donna, I just want to say that very important, that topic that was brought up. I think it was 2 years ago in every August, we have this seminar on abuse, and all these issues, you know, get addressed. And 2 years ago, it was so powerful. All of the panelists and the people in the audience, you know, we're all from the Caribbean, and that has happened to all of us. And so much feelings came out, and, you know, and there was a lot of research that was done, and what was brought to light, it was just so, I said, dear Jesus, all this time, you know, my experience like you was the same, Donna. I was not reconnected with my mom until I was 19 years old. And she left me with my grandmother since I was a little baby. And so came to live in our house, and she thought that she wants to still beat me, spank me. And, you know, all those things that little children, and even today, the connection is still, there's the gap, the fracture is still there. And I don't know, I don't have any hard feelings, because Oprah said, did you get love? Yes, my grandmother, she loved me, and I cherish that. Some people did not have that. So a lot of our people in our culture, yes, the wound is still gaping. Some are hemorrhaging, and they need support, trauma.
Yeah.
Counseling.
Yeah, I've definitely done a lot of work, and healing work, forgiveness work, all of that. But a lot of people don't do the work. And unfortunately, if we could even sit down with each other, and maybe even having family counselor. So, you know, we've got some amazing counselors here tonight. I know Dr. James has to go. Tell us about Victorious Living real quick, Dr. J.
Yeah, sure. So at Victorious Living, Jeanette also works at Victorious Living. We see everyone from children all the way up, you know, to however old, and not just on an individual basis. We do couples counseling, we do family counseling. So, you know, we can help you address some of these things that we're talking about now, you know, with the attachment and the lack thereof. And then and the difference with LBJ Behavioral, we do this exact same thing. The difference is with Victorious Living, we accept insurance and we accept people who can afford to be self-pay. LBJ is a nonprofit that I created specifically to help those individuals who need quality, culturally competent, ethical counseling services, but they do not have the means to pay for it. They do not have the insurance that'll cover the services. So essentially we do the same thing. One is just for people who are uninsured or underinsured, and Victorious Living are for those who have the privilege of having insurance or having the financial resources to pay out of pocket for the services.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Dr. James, do you take children for the LBJ counseling? Do you accept children?
Yes, yeah, that's what I said. In both companies, we see the same population. It's just one is for people with insurance and one is for people without insurance.
Okay, good to
Children
know.
included.
And
Yes,
what
good to
age
know.
group?
all the way from the youngest kids you can
Okay.
think of, like up all the way up to whatever age. We don't really discriminate.
Can you tell us your website or anything if people need to reach you?
Yes. So for Victorious Living, it is LetitiaBrowne-James.com. And Jean-Ann, would you put it in the chat for me, please?
Sure.
And then at LBJ Behavioral is LBJBehavioralServices.org. And you can find our phone number and our website. Actually, my mother-in-law, she's also from the Caribbean. She is from Dominica, and she serves as the office manager and the office administrator for both companies. So definitely, we're here to help and assist you in whatever way possible that you need, or even if it's just for a consultation or for questions, we will be happy to help or, point you in the right direction if you
Got
need
it.
more than what provide. Yeah.
That QR code is for LBJ, and if you scan it, you just put up your little phone on the camera and click it. It'll take you right to that web page for LBJ.
Got
Can
it.
you see?
And I'm putting the websites in the chat.
Yeah, I was going to do that for you, but this one I wanted, because this one is so fast and easy. It's really cool. And we're starting to do groups on Saturdays for adolescents and children. So just on Saturdays in person in our office for LBJ. So if you have anybody that that's in that age group, especially for the teenagers, I think the teenagers really need more socialization and doing a lot more social skills, because that's what you all were talking about, is really what they're lacking, right? If you have to say anything about your children and grandchildren, is that they don't know how to interact with each other anymore. They don't know how to speak to each other. They don't know how to play. We've lost that.
Right.
So true. Yes, ma'am.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you all. This was a wonderful topic, touching on a lot, that we as adults, middle-aged adults, still have had to go through, and so we know that if that the younger generation, they definitely, because I don't think they're as strong as we are mentally. I think that's one thing. We've been mentally strong, but we still, sometimes we think we're invincible, but sometimes we do need that counseling. We need that therapy, that listening ear to try to figure out what happened and move forward. And we have a lot of issues in this society. Housing is very high. That's a big, so you've got the regular day-to-day issues of making it okay for your family with food prices and gas prices and rent and all of that. So you have that plus whatever your family personal traumas, and if there's anything with relationships and the kids doing this and that, there is so much for us to have to deal with. So please reach out to our amazing professionals. Before we go, let's just say June, we've got we've got quite a few things coming up for June, Caribbean American Heritage Month. We've got our walk, Caribbean Diaspora Walk, June 8th, going down in Sanford at Sanford River Walk. It's a pop-up, so you just show up, bring your flag. Then Father's Day weekend, we have Father's Day, Caribbean Diaspora Father's Day soccer link up. Get your tickets. We've been posting it on Caribbean American Diaspora, Caribbean Rhythms Radio Network, and of course my page, Donna Morgan. Bring dad out for a night of soccer, with the Orlando City soccer. Tickets or prices are going up. It began at 23. I'm not even sure what it is right now. Get it while you can. Fellowship, come on out. Dr. Bevan or Beverly, is there something coming up for Antigua and Barbuda Association? No?
They're having a bus ride to Fort DeSoto on July 13th, which
Okay.
is a Saturday.
Okay,
So
so
that's Saturday, July 13th, bus ride to Fort DeSoto.
Send me a flyer. Send me a flyer, please.
I will. I
Yes.
will.
awesome, awesome. So, Dr. James, I think, and Jean-Ann, you're coming out to Sanford for the walk. You just sharing the flyer, Jean-Ann. You're not even.
I ain't walking nowhere. I ain't never walked before. You know, I'm not walking.
Look,
God, let's just
bring-
tell the shame the devil.
Bring your 2 flags. Bring your St. Vincent and your Barbados flag, and we're just gonna walk by the riverfront. It's an amazing Sanford Riverfront. Next in June, July, we're gonna go back to Lake Lorna Dune. So that's the Caribbean Diaspora pop-up. So just to promote health, wealth, and mental health, right? So we need that. Dr. James is partnering with us, and we're looking for other Caribbean professionals that want to partner with us and just do things together as a community. Get back into doing things, bring that unity back, representing all the different islands. So with that, I just want to give thanks that we were able to share some amazing information tonight. And I think that is it for me. Louis, how about you?
Just want to thank all the ladies, Dr. James, and of course, Miss Moses, Dr. Arlene, Dr. Bevan, and Dr. Beverly. All of you guys, excellent job. It was great. And coming up next, Donna, we'll catch you guys next week, same time. What's the
Yes.
topic for next week?
So next week, we actually want to just hear from organizations that have events for June. It's Caribbean American Heritage Month, so we want to talk about whatever is coming up for June. Thank you, Dr. Browne-James. And then we want to talk about men's health the second week, and the third week in June, we want to recognize our male trailblazers. You know, we have so many functions and events for women. So June is a perfect month for Father's Day to just big up the men a little bit.
I agree.
Right? So you male trailblazers, individuals that are going above and beyond in their community, showing up, whatever that it may be, send them to me so we can recognize them. But the second, we want to talk about men's health. There's a lot of trauma there. There's all this high estrogen level in men, and all of this, due to the food. Women are, it's like the women go low on estrogen, but then the men pick it up and they go higher. And so we're having an imbalance, right? So we need to talk about that. So lots of good stuff for June.
All right. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you all for being here.
Thank
On
you.
behalf of all of us here at the Caribbean Rhythms Radio Network, God bless you. Keep it locked.
Yes.
Good night.
Night.
Night.